She was only 12 years old when she first touched a piano. And that single moment would go on to change her entire life. Her name was Lena, and she lived in a small apartment above a laundromat in one of the oldest parts of the city. The building was old. The walls were thin. You could hear everything. The washing machines running downstairs. The neighbors talking through the walls. The cars honking outside at all hours of the night. It wasn't much, but it was home. Lena lived with her grandmother, a quiet woman with gentle hands and tired eyes. Her grandmother had raised her since she was just 3 years old, after her parents passed away in a car accident. Lena didn't remember much about them. Just a few flashes. A woman's soft voice. A man's warm laugh. The smell of flowers. That was all she had left of them. Her grandmother worked long hours at the laundromat, folding clothes, pressing shirts, counting coins at the end of each day. The money was never enough, but somehow they always got by. They didn't have fancy things. No big television. No new clothes. No vacations. But they had each other, and for Lena, that was enough. Every day after school, Lena walked the same route home. Past the corner store with the faded sign. Past the barber shop where old men sat outside playing cards. Past the empty lot filled with weeds and broken glass. And then, right before the laundromat, she would pass the old community center. The building had seen better days. The paint was chipped. The windows were dusty. Most of the programs had shut down years ago because of budget cuts. But the doors were still open, and a few kids from the neighborhood would go inside to play basketball or do their homework. Lena never went in. She always just walked past. But one afternoon, something made her stop. Through the window, she saw it. A piano. It sat in the corner of the main room, covered in dust, half forgotten. It looked old and worn, like it had been sitting there for decades. Some of the keys were yellow. The wood was scratched. But to Lena, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She didn't know why, but something about it pulled at her heart. It was like the piano was calling to her, waiting for her. For a whole week, she just stood outside and stared at it through the window. She was too scared to go in, too scared to touch it. What if someone laughed at her? What if she wasn't allowed? What if she broke something? But the pull was too strong. One rainy afternoon, Lena finally gathered the courage to walk inside. The room was almost empty. Just a few kids shooting hoops on the other side. No one paid attention to her. She walked slowly toward the corner, her heart pounding in her chest. When she reached the piano, she just stood there for a long moment, staring at it. Then, very slowly, she reached out and pressed a single key. The sound that came out was soft and clear. It echoed through the room like a tiny bell. Lena felt a shiver run down her spine. She pressed another key, then another. The sounds weren't music, just random notes, but they were hers. She was making them, and in that moment, something woke up inside her. Something she couldn't explain. From that day on, Lena went to the community center every single afternoon. She would sit at that dusty piano and try to figure out how to play. She didn't have a teacher. She didn't have books. She didn't have money for lessons. All she had was an old tablet with a cracked screen that her grandmother had bought at a second-hand store. She would watch free videos online, tutorials from strangers around the world who taught basic piano for beginners. She would watch their fingers move across the keys, then try to copy them, over and over again. Sometimes for hours. It was hard, really hard. Her fingers didn't move the way she wanted them to. The notes came out wrong. She would make the same mistakes 100 times. Some days she wanted to give up. Some days she almost did. But she kept coming back. There was something about the piano that made her feel alive. When she played, she forgot about the thin walls and the noisy street. She forgot about the kids at school who made fun of her worn-out shoes. She forgot about how tired her grandmother looked at the end of each day. When her fingers touched those keys, she was somewhere else. Somewhere peaceful. Somewhere free. Weeks turned into months. And slowly, very slowly, she started to get better. Her grandmother noticed the change. Lena would come home later than usual, her eyes bright, her fingers moving in the air like she was still playing. At first, her grandmother didn't say anything. She just watched. But one evening, as they sat together eating dinner, she finally asked, "What have you been doing after school, child?" Lena looked down at her plate. She didn't know how to explain it. She was almost embarrassed. Learning piano felt like a silly dream for a girl like her. A girl with no money, no connections, no future in music. But her grandmother waited patiently, and finally Lena told her everything. About the piano in the community center. About the videos she watched. About how much she loved the feeling of making music, even if she wasn't very good yet. When she finished, she looked up, expecting her grandmother to tell her to focus on something more practical, something that could actually help them one day. But her grandmother didn't say that. Instead, the old woman stood up slowly and walked to her bedroom. Lena heard her opening a drawer. A moment later, she came back holding something in her hands. It was a photograph, old and faded, with creased edges and yellowed corners. Lena took it carefully. In the picture, she saw a young woman in a beautiful dress, sitting at a grand piano. The woman was elegant and poised, with a gentle smile on her face. Behind her was a stage, and beyond that, an audience of hundreds. "Who is this?" Lena whispered. Her grandmother sat down beside her. "That is my mother, your great-grandmother." Lena stared at the photo, her heart beating fast. She had never seen this picture before. She didn't even know her family had any connection to music. She was a pianist, her grandmother continued, her voice soft with memory. Back in our homeland, before the war. She played in concert halls. For important people. She was very gifted. Everyone said so. Lena couldn't believe what she was hearing. What happened to her? Her grandmother's eyes grew sad. The war took everything. The concert halls. The pianos. Our home. We lost it all. She never played again. But she never forgot the music. She used to hum the melodies to me when I was a little girl. Even at the very end, she was still humming. Lena looked at the photograph again. At the woman who shared her blood. The woman who had once made beautiful music for the world. Her grandmother placed a gentle hand on hers. "The music is already inside you, child. It has been passed down through generations. You just needed to find it." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the photograph resting on her chest. She thought about her great-grandmother, about the gift that had been lost, about the dream that had been buried for so many years, and she made a promise to herself. She would learn to play, no matter how hard it was, no matter how long it took, no matter what anyone said. She would bring the music back to life. Lena practiced every single day, rain or shine, tired or not. She never missed a session at the community center. The old piano became her best friend, her escape, her entire world. Months passed, and she was getting better. Her fingers moved faster now. The notes came out smoother. She learned simple songs first, nursery rhymes, easy melodies. Then she moved on to harder pieces, classical compositions that made her stretch her fingers in ways she never thought possible. But learning alone was difficult. Without a real teacher, she made mistakes she didn't even know were mistakes. Her posture was wrong. Her timing was off. Some notes she played weren't quite right, but she couldn't hear the difference. Still, she kept going. She believed that if she practiced hard enough, she would eventually figure it out. What she didn't expect was that her secret would not stay secret for long. It started small. A boy from her school walked past the community center one afternoon and saw her through the window. He didn't say anything at first, but the next day at school, he mentioned it to a friend. And that friend told another friend. And before Lena knew it, the whole school seemed to know. Did you hear? Lena thinks she can play piano. The whispers followed her everywhere. In the hallways, in the cafeteria, even in class. At first, Lena tried to ignore them. She told herself it didn't matter what people thought. She was doing this for herself, not for them. But then the comments got louder. Piano is for rich kids, one girl said, loud enough for Lena to hear. What's she going to do? Play concerts in that old laundromat? A group of boys laughed as she walked past. Hey, piano girl, you going to play us a song with those dirty keys? Lena kept her head down and kept walking. She didn't respond. She didn't fight back. But every word cut into her like a knife. The worst part came from a girl named Priya. Priya was everything Lena was not. Her family was wealthy. She lived in a big house on the nice side of town. She wore designer clothes and carried expensive bags. And she had been taking piano lessons at a prestigious music academy since she was 5 years old. Priya was talented. Everyone knew it. She had won competitions. She had performed at fancy events. Her parents bragged about her to anyone who would listen. And Priya made sure everyone at school knew just how good she was. When Priya heard that Lena was learning piano, she didn't just laugh. She made it personal. You're teaching yourself from videos? Priya said one day, standing in front of Lena with her arms crossed. A group of girls stood behind her, giggling. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. You can't learn real piano from the internet. You need proper training. You need a real teacher. You need talent. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. And let's be honest, you don't have any of that. Lena felt her face burn with shame. She wanted to say something. She wanted to defend herself. But the words wouldn't come. She just stood there, frozen, while Priya and her friends walked away laughing. That night, Lena cried into her pillow. She didn't tell her grandmother what happened. She didn't want to worry her. But the pain was real. The doubt was growing. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was fooling herself. Maybe a girl like her had no business dreaming of music. But she didn't stop practicing. Not yet. A few weeks later, the school announced a small talent show. Students could sign up to perform anything they wanted. Singing, dancing, magic tricks, anything. And at the bottom of the sign-up sheet, there was a note that said a piano would be available for anyone who wanted to play. Lena stared at that note for a long time. Part of her wanted to sign up. This was her chance to show everyone what she had learned. To prove that she wasn't just some silly girl with a silly dream. To prove that she belonged. But another part of her was terrified. What if she messed up? What if people laughed? What if Priya was right? For 3 days, she went back and forth. Yes, no, yes, no. Finally, on the last day of sign-ups, she wrote her name on the list. Her hand was shaking as she did it. The day of the talent show came faster than she expected. The school auditorium was packed. Students filled the seats. Teachers stood along the walls. Parents sat in the back rows, recording everything on their phones. The air buzzed with excitement and nerves. Lena sat backstage, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. She watched the other performers go on. A boy did a magic trick. A group of girls danced to a pop song. A kid told jokes that made everyone laugh. Then it was her turn. She walked onto the stage, and the room went quiet. The piano sat in the center, shiny under the bright lights. It was much nicer than the old one at the community center. Bigger, grander, more intimidating. Lena sat down on the bench. Her fingers trembled. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her. She could hear whispers from the audience. "Is that the laundromat girl?" She taught herself from YouTube. This should be interesting. She tried to block it out. She closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. And then she began to play. The piece she had chosen was simple. A classical melody she had practiced 100 times. She knew it by heart. She had played it perfectly at the community center just the day before. But here, on this stage, everything felt different. Her fingers were stiff. Her timing was off. She hit a wrong note in the first few seconds. Then another, and another. The music that had sounded so beautiful in the empty community center now sounded clumsy and broken. She heard a giggle from the audience. Then another. She opened her eyes and saw Priya sitting in the front row, whispering something to her friends. They were all smiling. Not kind smiles. Mocking smiles. Lena's hands froze. She couldn't remember what came next. The notes disappeared from her mind like smoke. She sat there, staring at the keys, her face burning red. The giggles turned into full laughter. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to break her. She stood up so fast, the bench almost fell over. Without looking at anyone, she ran off the stage. Through the curtain. Down the hallway. Out the back door. She didn't stop until she reached the empty parking lot behind the school. And there, alone in the cold afternoon air, she broke down and cried. She cried for the mistakes she made. She cried for the laughter she heard. She cried for the dream that suddenly felt impossible. When she finally got home that night, her grandmother was waiting for her. The old woman took one look at Lena's red eyes and tear-stained cheeks, and she knew. She didn't ask questions. She just opened her arms. Lena fell into her grandmother's embrace and sobbed. "I can't do it," she whispered. "I'm not good enough. I'll never be good enough. I want to quit." Her grandmother held her tight for a long moment. Then she pulled back and looked into Lena's eyes. "Do you remember what I told you about your great-grandmother?" Lena nodded weakly. "She faced worse than laughter, child. She faced war. She faced loss. She lost everything she loved. But you know what she never lost?" Lena shook her head, the music inside her heart. Her grandmother placed a hand on Lena's chest. "It's in here. It's been in our family for generations. And no amount of laughter, no amount of cruelty, no amount of doubt can ever take it away. Unless you let it." She wiped the tears from Lena's cheeks. "The world will always try to tell you what you can't do. But you get to decide what you believe. So tell me, child, do you love the piano?" Lena thought about the first time she touched those dusty keys. The way the sound made her feel. The peace. The freedom. The joy. "Yes," she whispered. "I love it." Her grandmother smiled. "Then don't you dare give up." That night, Lena lay in bed, exhausted but strangely calm. The laughter still echoed in her mind. The shame still burned in her chest. But underneath it all, there was something else. A tiny spark of determination. She wasn't going to quit. Not now. Not ever. She would find a way to get better. She would prove them all wrong. She just didn't know how yet. 3 days passed after the talent show disaster. 3 long, painful days where Lena didn't go to the community center. She went straight home after school, locked herself in her tiny room, and tried to forget. She tried to convince herself that she didn't care about the piano anymore, that it was just a silly hobby. that she could move on, but she couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the keys. Every time the apartment went quiet, she heard the music in her head. The piano was part of her now. Walking away from it felt like walking away from herself. On the fourth day, she couldn't take it anymore. After school, instead of going home, she found herself walking toward the community center. Her feet moved on their own, like they knew where she needed to be, even when her mind was full of doubt. When she reached the building, she stood outside for a long time, staring at the door. She was scared. Scared of the memories. Scared of the pain. Scared of trying again and failing again. But she went in anyway. The main room was empty, just like it usually was in the late afternoon. The basketball court was silent. The old chairs were stacked in the corner, and the piano sat there, waiting for her, just like always. But something was different. Someone was already sitting at the piano. Lina stopped in her tracks. She had never seen anyone else play that piano before. In all the months she had been coming here, it had always been hers alone. But now, an elderly man sat on the bench, his back straight, his hands resting gently on the keys. He was old, maybe 70, maybe older. His hair was white and thin. His face was lined with wrinkles. He wore a simple gray sweater and old brown shoes. He didn't look like anyone special. Just a quiet old man in a forgotten community center. Then he started to play . And Lina's world stopped. The music that came from that old, dusty piano was unlike anything she had ever heard. It was beautiful, heartbreaking. It filled the entire room and wrapped around her like a warm blanket. The melody rose and fell like waves on the ocean. It whispered and roared. It made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. She stood frozen by the door, her mouth open, her eyes wide. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. She just listened. When the final note faded into silence, the old man sat still for a moment. Then, without turning around, he spoke. "You can come closer, you know. The piano doesn't bite." Lina jumped. She hadn't realized he knew she was there. Her face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I'll come back later." "No need." The old man turned slowly on the bench and looked at her. His eyes were dark and deep, filled with years of stories. But there was kindness in them, too. A warmth that made Lina feel safe. "I've seen you before. Through the window. Practicing every afternoon." Lina felt her cheeks grow even hotter. "You watched me?" "Hard not to." He smiled gently. "You come here every day, rain or shine. You sit at this piano for hours. Not many young people have that kind of dedication anymore." Lina didn't know what to say. She looked down at her feet. The old man studied her for a moment. "You have a gift, you know, raw, unpolished, but real." Lina looked up surprised. "A gift? I'm terrible. I messed up at the talent show. Everyone laughed at me, so I heard." Her heart sank. Even this stranger knew about her humiliation, but the old man didn't laugh. He didn't mock her. He just nodded slowly, like he understood something she didn't. "Let me tell you a secret," he said. "Every great pianist in history has had a moment like yours. A moment where they failed. A moment where the world laughed. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't isn't talent. It's what you do after you fall." Lina stared at him. "Who are you?" The old man smiled again. "My name is Mr. Kwan. A long time ago, I used to play piano for a living." "For a living? Like professionally?" "You could say that." He chuckled softly. "I performed in concert halls around the world. Paris, Vienna, New York, Tokyo. I played for audiences of thousands. Critics called me one of the finest pianists of my generation." Lena's eyes went wide. This quiet old man in the rundown community center was a world-famous pianist? It didn't seem possible. What happened? She asked. Why are you here? Mr. Kwan's smile faded a little. He looked down at his hands, weathered and spotted with age. Life happened. I got older. My wife passed away. My children moved far away. The concert halls didn't want an old man anymore. So I came here, to this neighborhood, to live out my remaining years in peace. He looked back at the piano. I thought I was done with music. I thought I had nothing left to give. But then I saw you through that window, practicing alone, teaching yourself from videos, making mistake after mistake, but never giving up. He turned to face her fully. You reminded me of myself. A long, long time ago. Lena felt a lump forming in her throat. I don't know if I can keep going. After what happened, you can, Mr. Kwan said firmly. But not alone. You need guidance. You need someone to teach you properly. He paused, and his eyes met hers. I would like to be that person, if you'll let me. Lena couldn't believe what she was hearing. You want to teach me? But why? You don't even know me. I know enough. He stood up slowly, his joints creaking with age. I see the fire in your eyes. The same fire I had when I was young. That fire is rare, and it would be a shame to let it burn out. He extended his hand. I'll teach you everything I know. No charge. But I have one condition. Lena hesitated. What condition? You must promise me that you will never give up, no matter how hard it gets, no matter what anyone says, no matter how many times you fall. You keep getting up. You keep playing. Can you promise me that? Lena looked at his hand, then at the piano, then back at him. She thought about her grandmother's words, about her great-grandmother's legacy, about the music that had been sleeping in her blood for generations. She reached out and shook his hand. I promise. And so began the hardest 18 months of her life. Mr. Kwan was not an easy teacher. He was patient, yes, but he was also demanding. He pushed her further than she ever thought possible. He corrected every tiny mistake. He made her play the same passage 100 times until it was perfect. He taught her about posture, about breathing, about feeling the music instead of just playing the notes. They met every day, early in the morning before school and late in the afternoon after. Lena's fingers ached. Her back hurt from sitting so long. Some nights she was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open at dinner, but she never complained. She never missed a lesson. She had made a promise, and she intended to keep it. Slowly, week by week, month by month, she began to transform. The clumsy girl who had stumbled through a simple melody at the talent show was becoming something else. Her fingers moved with precision. Her timing was flawless. She learned pieces she once thought were impossible. Beethoven, Mozart, Chopin. Music that made her heart soar. Mr. Kwan watched her progress with quiet pride. He didn't give compliments easily, but sometimes, at the end of a lesson, he would nod slowly and say, Good, again tomorrow. And for Lena, that was enough. She kept her training a secret from everyone at school. She didn't want anyone to know. She didn't want to give them another reason to mock her. So she stayed quiet, kept her head down, and let them believe she had given up. But inside, she was preparing for something. She didn't know what yet. She just knew that when the moment came, she would be ready. One evening, as the sun set outside the community center, Mr. Kwan finished a lesson and sat back with a thoughtful look on his face. You've grown so much, he said quietly. More than I ever expected. Lena smiled, wiping the sweat from her forehead. I had a good teacher. He shook his head. No, the talent was always yours. I just helped you find it. He paused, then looked at her with serious eyes. There's a competition coming up. A big one. The Regional Young Pianists Competition. Winners get a full scholarship to one of the best music schools in the country. Lena's heart skipped a beat. A competition? Yes, and I think you're ready. Fear and excitement swirled inside her. A real competition. A chance to prove herself. A chance to show everyone what she had become, but also a chance to fail again. In front of even more people, Mr. Kwan seemed to read her thoughts. You're scared. That's natural. But remember what you promised me. Lena took a deep breath. She thought about all the early mornings, all the late nights, all the pain and sweat and tears. She looked at Mr. Kwan and nodded. I'll do it. The weeks leading up to the competition were the most intense of Lena's life. She practiced until her fingers were numb. She played until she could hear the music in her dreams. Every free moment she had, she spent at the community center with Mr. Kwan, going over every note, every pause, every breath. The piece she had chosen was Chopin's Ballade No. 1. It was one of the most difficult piano compositions ever written. A piece that took most professional pianists years to master. When Mr. Kwan first adjusted it, Lena thought he was joking. This is impossible, she said, staring at the sheet music. I can't play this. Mr. Kwan just smiled. Not yet. But you will. And so she worked. Hour after hour. Day after day. The piece was like a mountain she had to climb, and some days it felt like she would never reach the top. But Mr. Kwan was always there, guiding her, pushing her, believing in her even when she didn't believe in herself. Finally, the night before the competition, Mr. Kwan told her to stop. No more practice, he said. You're ready. Now you need to rest. Lena didn't feel ready. She felt terrified. But she trusted him, so she went home. That night, her grandmother made her favorite meal. A simple dish, nothing fancy, but made with love. They sat together at the small kitchen table, just the two of them, like they had done 1,000 times before. Are you nervous? Her grandmother asked. Lena nodded. Very. Her grandmother reached across the table and took her hand. Do you remember what I told you? About the music inside you? I remember. Then you have nothing to fear. Her grandmother squeezed her hand gently. Tomorrow, you don't play for the judges. You don't play for the audience. You don't play for the people who doubted you. You play for yourself. You play for the love of music. That's all that matters. Lena felt tears prick her eyes. She leaned over and hugged her grandmother tight. Thank you for everything. Go to sleep now, child. Tomorrow is your day. But sleep didn't come easy. Lena lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She thought about all the moments that had led to this. The first time she touched the piano, the laughter at the talent show, Mr. Kwan's patient lessons, her grandmother's quiet faith. Somewhere in the middle of the night, she finally drifted off. The morning of the competition arrived gray and cold. A light drizzle fell from the sky as Lena and her grandmother took the bus across town to the concert hall where the event was being held. Lena had never been to this part of the city before. The buildings were taller here. The streets were cleaner. Everything looked expensive and polished. She felt out of place in her simple clothes, carrying nothing but a small bag with her sheet music inside. When they arrived at the concert hall, Lena's heart nearly stopped. The building was enormous. Grand columns framed the entrance. A red carpet led up the stairs. Fancy cars pulled up to drop off well-dressed families. Everywhere she looked, she saw wealth and privilege. Parents in designer suits. children in formal attire. Everyone looked like they belonged on a magazine cover. And then there was her, a girl from above a laundromat, wearing a dress her grandmother had sewn by hand. Maybe this was a mistake, Lena whispered. Her grandmother shook her head firmly. No, you belong here just as much as anyone else. Don't let the fancy clothes fool you. When you sit at that piano, none of that matters. Only the music matters. Lena took a deep breath and nodded. Together, they walked inside. The lobby was even more impressive than the outside. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. The floors were polished marble. A large banner announced the Regional Young Pianists Competition, listing the sponsors and prizes. First place was a full scholarship to the Harrison Conservatory of Music, one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. Second place was a cash prize and a summer workshop. Third place was a smaller cash prize. But everyone knew that first place was the only prize that truly mattered. Lena registered at the front desk and received a number. She was contestant number 14. There were 20 competitors in total, all between the ages of 12 and 18. She would perform somewhere in the middle of the program. Her grandmother wasn't allowed backstage, so they said goodbye in the lobby. I'll be in the audience, her grandmother said, right in the front row. I'll be watching every moment. Lena hugged her one last time, then walked through the doors marked Performers Only. Backstage was chaos. Young pianists everywhere, warming up their fingers, muttering to themselves, pacing back and forth. Some looked confident. Some looked terrified. Some had private coaches whispering last-minute instructions in their ears. Lena found a quiet corner and sat down alone. She closed her eyes and tried to calm her racing heart. She thought about Mr. Kwan's words. She thought about her grandmother's faith. She thought about her great-grandmother, playing for kings in a world that no longer existed. She could do this. She had to do this. Well. Look who decided to show up. Lena's eyes snapped open. Standing in front of her, arms crossed, with a smirk on her perfect face, was Priya. She looked even more polished than usual. Her hair was styled elegantly. Her dress probably cost more than everything Lena owned combined. Behind her stood 2 other girls from her music academy, looking at Lena like she was something stuck to the bottom of their shoes. I heard you entered the competition, Priya said. I didn't believe it at first. After what happened at the talent show, I figured you'd never touch a piano again. Lena said nothing. She just looked at Priya calmly. You know you don't belong here, right? Priya continued. These are real pianists. People who've trained at real academies with real teachers. Not some girl who learned from YouTube videos in a dirty community center. One of the girls behind her giggled. Lena felt the old familiar sting of shame. But this time, something was different. This time, she didn't look away. She didn't feel her face burn with embarrassment. Instead, she felt something else rising inside her. Something stronger. She stood up slowly and looked Priya directly in the eyes. You're right, Lena said quietly. I didn't train at a fancy academy. I don't have rich parents. I don't have designer clothes. But I've worked harder than you can imagine to be here. And when I sit at that piano today, I'm going to play with everything I have. She paused, letting the words sink in. So say whatever you want. Laugh all you want. But I'm not going anywhere. Priya's smirk faltered, just for a second. She hadn't expected Lena to fight back. She opened her mouth to say something else, but before she could, an announcer's voice came over the speakers. Contestants, please prepare. The competition will begin in 10 minutes. Priya gave Lena one last look, a look full of contempt and something else. Something that might have been doubt. Then she turned and walked away, her friends following behind. Lena sat back down, her heart pounding. But it wasn't fear she felt anymore. It was determination. The competition began. One by one, the contestants took the stage. Lena listened from backstage as beautiful music filled the concert hall. Some performances were good. Some were incredible. These were talented young pianists, the best in the region, and they had all come to win. When Priya performed, the audience erupted in applause. Her piece was flawless, technical, precise, every note in perfect place. She took a bow with a satisfied smile, knowing she had set the bar high. Then it was Lena's turn. Contestant number 14, please take the stage. Lena stood up. Her legs felt weak. Her hands were trembling. She walked toward the stage entrance, her heart beating so loud she could hear it in her ears. She stepped out into the bright lights. The concert hall was massive. Hundreds of people filled the seats. Judges sat at a long table in the front row, their faces serious and unreadable. And there, right behind them, was her grandmother, hands clasped together, eyes shining with hope. Lena walked to the grand piano in the center of the stage. It was the most beautiful instrument she had ever seen. Black and gleaming, like a sleeping giant waiting to be awakened. She sat down on the bench. The leather was cool beneath her. She adjusted her position, placed her fingers gently on the keys, and looked out at the audience. She saw the doubt in some of their eyes. She heard a few whispers. She knew what they were thinking. Who is this girl? Where did she come from? Does she really think she can compete? But she also saw her grandmother's face, calm, proud, believing, and somewhere she imagined Mr. Kwan watching too. Lena closed her eyes. She took a slow, deep breath. She let go of the fear. She let go of the doubt. She let go of everything except the music. Then she began to play. The first note rang out into the silence, soft, delicate, like the first drop of rain before a storm. Lena kept her eyes closed. She didn't want to see the audience. She didn't want to see the judges. She only wanted to feel the music, to let it flow through her fingers, through her heart, through her soul. The melody began to build, slowly at first, gentle and searching, like a question waiting to be answered. Her fingers moved across the keys with a grace she didn't know she had. Every hour of practice, every painful lesson, every tear she had cried, it was all leading to this moment. In the audience, people shifted in their seats. Some leaned forward. Others exchanged glances. This wasn't what they expected. This wasn't the clumsy girl from a poor neighborhood they had heard whispers about. This was something else entirely. The music grew stronger. The notes came faster now, tumbling over each other like waves crashing against rocks. Lena poured everything into the piano. All the pain of being mocked. All the loneliness of practicing alone. All the love she felt for her grandmother, for Mr. Kwan, for the great-grandmother she never knew. She played the struggle, the doubt, the moments when she wanted to give up. She played the nights she cried into her pillow, the mornings she woke up before dawn just to practice, the feeling of being told she would never be good enough. And then, as the music shifted, she played the hope, the spark that never died, the dream that refused to be silenced, the fire that burned inside her no matter how many people tried to put it out. The concert hall had gone completely still. No one moved. No one whispered. Every single person was frozen, caught in the spell of the music. One of the judges, a stern woman who had been frowning through most of the performances, slowly uncrossed her arms. Her expression softened. Another judge wiped something from the corner of his eye. In the front row, Lena's grandmother sat with her hands pressed against her chest. Tears streamed down her wrinkled cheeks, but she was smiling wider than she had smiled in years. And somewhere in the back of the hall, hidden in the shadows, An old man in a gray sweater watched with quiet pride. Mr. Kwan had come after all. He hadn't told Lena he would be there. He didn't want to add to her pressure. But he couldn't stay away. He had to see what his student had become. The music reached its peak. The notes rang out like thunder, filling every corner of the massive hall. Lena's fingers flew across the keys with power and precision. This was the hardest part of the piece, the part that had made her cry with frustration 100 times, the part that seemed impossible when she first saw it on the sheet music. But now, in this moment, it wasn't impossible. It was natural. It was part of her dot. And then, slowly, the storm began to fade. The music softened. The thunder became a whisper. The final passages were gentle and bittersweet, like saying goodbye to someone you love, like letting go of the past and stepping into the future. Lena played the last few notes with her whole heart. Each one carried a piece of her story. The laundromat, the dusty piano, the laughter, the tears, the promise she made to never give up. The final note hung in the air for a long, breathless moment. Then silence. Complete, absolute silence. Lena opened her eyes. For a second, she thought something was wrong. Why wasn't anyone moving? Why wasn't anyone making a sound? And then it happened. One person stood up. Then another. Then 10 more. Then 100. Within seconds, the entire concert hall was on its feet. The applause erupted like a thunderstorm, so loud it shook the walls. People were cheering, crying, shouting. Lena sat frozen at the piano, unable to process what was happening. She looked at the audience and saw faces she didn't recognize, all of them looking at her with awe and admiration. She saw the judges, all of them standing, all of them clapping, and she saw her grandmother, sobbing with joy, her hands reaching toward the stage as if she wanted to hold her granddaughter in her arms. Lena stood up slowly. Her legs were shaking. Her heart was pounding. She took a bow, just like Mr. Kwan had taught her, and the applause grew even louder. When she walked off the stage, she felt like she was floating, like she was in a dream. Did that really just happen? Did she really just do that? Backstage, the other contestants stared at her as she passed. Some looked impressed. Some looked stunned. A few even started clapping for her. But one person didn't clap. Priya stood in the corner, her face pale, her expression unreadable. She didn't say anything. She didn't smirk. She didn't mock. She just watched as Lena walked by, and for the first time, there was no cruelty in her eyes. Only silence. The rest of the competition passed in a blur. More contestants performed. More applause filled the hall. But Lena barely heard any of it. She sat in a quiet corner, her hands still trembling, her mind still replaying every note she had played. Finally, the announcer returned to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, the judges have made their decision. Please welcome our panel to announce the winners of this year's Regional Young Pianists Competition. The head judge, a tall man with silver hair, stepped up to the microphone. He spoke about the incredible talent they had witnessed. He praised all the contestants for their hard work and dedication. Then he began to announce the winners. In third place, receiving a cash prize of $1,000. A name was called. Applause. A young boy walked up to receive his trophy. In second place, receiving a cash prize of $3,000 and a spot in our summer workshop. Another name. More applause. A girl walked up, smiling nervously. Lena's heart was beating so fast she could barely breathe. She looked across the room and saw Priya, standing tall, clearly expecting her name to be called next. The judge paused. He looked out at the audience. Then he smiled. And in first place, receiving a full scholarship to the Harrison Conservatory of Music, Lena closed her eyes. Contestant number 14, Lena. The world stopped. Then the world exploded. The applause was deafening. People were screaming her name. Someone grabbed her arm and pushed her toward the stage. She walked in a daze, her legs moving on their own, her mind unable to catch up with reality. She climbed the stairs. She crossed the stage. The judge shook her hand and placed a golden trophy in her arms. Cameras flashed. The audience roared. And through it all, Lena couldn't stop the tears from falling. She had done it. She had really done it. After the ceremony, her grandmother rushed to meet her. They held each other for a long time, crying and laughing at the same time. No words were needed. They both knew what this moment meant. And Lena looked up and saw him. Mr. Kwan stood a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, a small smile on his weathered face. She ran to him and threw her arms around him. "You came," she whispered. "You came." "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," he said softly. "You were magnificent. Everything I knew you could be." Lena pulled back and looked at him with tears in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you. Any of it." Mr. Kwan shook his head gently. "No, the talent was always yours. The heart was always yours. I just helped you believe in what was already there." That night, Lena went home to the same small apartment above the laundromat. Nothing had changed. The walls were still thin. The floors still creaked. The washing machine still hummed downstairs. But everything had changed. She sat by the window, holding her trophy, looking out at the city lights. She thought about all the people who had laughed at her. All the people who told her she wasn't good enough. All the voices that said a girl like her had no business dreaming of music. She had proved them all wrong, not with anger, not with revenge, but with something far more powerful. She had proved them wrong by never giving up. And as she sat there in the quiet of the night, she made a new promise to herself. She would keep playing. She would keep growing. She would honor the legacy of her great-grandmother, the faith of her grandmother, and the wisdom of her mentor. The music was inside her now, and nothing would ever silence it again.